I'm Anna Pindau and I'm going to talk about the murder case of Stacy Stites. This is known as one of the many cases of a man wrongly convicted on death row, which to this day still is. Rodney Reed is still in jail for a crime he did not commit, and I'm doing this video to make people understand that he is innocent. It all started in Texas in the Deep South in 1996 with this 19-year-old girl named Stacy Stites. Stacy loved to party, and one day while she was out partying, she met this guy called Jimmy Fennell. Jimmy was a police officer, and after talking for a while, they hit it off. A few months later, they're engaged. Stacy started working earlier in her grocery store shift to earn enough money for a wedding. She started the shift at 3 a.m. and ended it nearly at midnight. She was very excited for this wedding, but after a few days, she disappeared in the middle of the night and was found dead by strangulation. Jimmy was the most probable suspect, as is normally done in murder cases, but he was very upset about it, so people did not suspect him. Stacy was buried in her wedding dress and the investigation moved on. They investigated how it all started and interrogated Jimmy, her fiancé and boyfriend.
According to the statements by Officer Fennell, they took a shower and she went to bed about 8 o'clock. He stayed up watching TV until about 9 p.m.
When she got off work and they went upstairs together, they got undressed, they took a shower together, they got out of the shower and they got partially dressed, crawled into bed. He gave her a back rub while they talked about the wedding. She fell asleep. He went into the living room, fell asleep watching TV, came back, got in bed. He didn't see her leave.
You realize this entire case is built on Fennell's version of events, which, I might add, according to his own story, he slept through.
Basically, Jimmy's contradicting himself, telling them what Stacy did while saying he doesn't know and was asleep. This is obviously suspicious at first, but the police doesn't push further. Later on, they found out that Stacy had been driving Jimmy's truck before disappearing. They find the truck. The truck wasn't just empty. The seat was reclined, there was a big pool of saliva on the floor, and the driver's seatbelt was buckled, and there was a broken belt outside of the driver's door. None of this was normal. But the police officers who found the truck thought that the truck wasn't important or had any sort of valuable evidence, so they didn't check the truck for anything. After that, they gave it back to Jimmy, who sold it right away. This means the truck never got checked for evidence. A lot of people suspect this happened because the police officers who found the truck were friends of Jimmy and were covering for him. This is obviously not far-fetched since one of the police officers in the case is in fact a friend of Jimmy's. Lynn Rocky Wardlow was Jimmy's former roommate, and he decides they also don't have to check Stacy and Jimmy's house, even though it's the most likely place where the victim was last seen. So now we have two locations where Stacy was last seen which were not searched for evidence, the house and the truck.
Later on, after the investigation became a homicide investigation, the police did come out and canvass the neighbors here. However, what appeared rather strange to me is that they never searched the apartment to see if anything untoward happened in the apartment there.
One of the cops said, well, we couldn't have gone to the apartment and searched the apartment because we didn't have enough probable cause. I thought, that is the strangest thing I've ever heard.
That's the last place they know she came from. Quite naturally, you're gonna go to the last place that anybody's seen her, she was all right, and start from there, and then go to the end.
A witness said that they saw the truck at school though, but weirdly enough there were 4 police officers around the truck. But they were not searching, they were keeping guard, almost as if they were hiding something. The 4 police officers that were keeping guard were Rocky and David, 2 of Jimmy's friends, Jimmy himself and Ed. Now, Ed Salmela was the lead investigator of the case. He had been in the police force for 12 years and was only 4 months in the case, when suddenly he got fired for no apparent reason. 2 days later, he was found dead. The police ruled a suicide, even though there was evidence that suggested otherwise. For starters, Ed had gone to the dry cleaner and dropped off his clothes, saying he would come back in an hour. Then he went to the bank, takes out a bunch of cash. This implicates that he was not planning on dying the same day. Not only that, but there was no gun residue on his body, including his hands. He was also shot with his left hand, even though he was not left-handed. This points to a fake suicide covering what could be a murder. Either way, after Officer Salmela dies, Rocky, Jimmy's BFF, is assigned as the new lead investigator. How convenient. The other police officer, David Hall, is the one who's going to bring Rodney Reed into this case. David had a previous case with Rodney, one involving domestic abuse. However, all charges had been dropped by Rodney's wife. David, regardless, a year after the murder, managed to obtain Rodney's DNA and connect it to Stacy's murder. This was because Rodney was having an affair with Stacy. A lot of people have seen them together. They said that Stacy was not being forced and was in fact in a relationship with Rodney. Rodney's DNA was at the crime scene in Stacy's body. The police assumed that then Rodney was the murderer. Now, in the Deep South, you got a white woman dating a black man, and the fiancé, who is a cop, obviously has his ego hurt, especially Jimmy, who is apparently very racist. He couldn't handle it. Most likely, Jimmy could at least be a possible suspect, but the police investigates Rodney instead. So the police go to Rodney's house to talk to him, but his mom says he wasn't home. Rodney hears that the cops were looking for him. He thinks it's about some drugs, so he turns himself in. Now think about it. If he had murdered someone, he wouldn't just turn himself in thinking it's about some drugs. You can imagine that he was shocked that the cops were arresting him for the murder of Stacy Stites. Rodney knew Stacy had died, but his friend kept insisting to not tell the police that he knew her. That would obviously go bad for him. So, a very scared Rodney had to lie. He denies ever knowing Stacy. But the police knows. When the culprit lies, the police assume he is most likely the one who committed the crime. So, they think they got the murderer. As said before though, a lot of people knew that Rodney and Stacy were together. This included Jimmy. Apparently, he knew about it, and this could have been his snapping point. It would make sense given Jimmy was a bad guy, very manipulative of Stacy.
I know that whenever she had told me that, she had started dating Jimmy and, that she was happy because she thought that she actually found somebody that she could spend the rest of her life with, and that things, you have to work to make things work in the relationship. And at first it seemed like everything was coming together, and then there are a few times, I guess, after she had moved to Giddings, I talked to her maybe once a week, then it went to like once every 2 weeks, and then it kind of got, far-fetched. And I know multiple times that she was supposed to come down, or, she wanted to go out, and he didn't want that. She was supposed to be at home, cooking supper, doing, already kind of like the wife thing, that she shouldn't, why would she want to go out anymore? So I think when their relationship started, we got more distant. Multiple times he would walk in and hang up the phone before even saying anything. I know one time, I don't know if it was during Jamboree, it was kind of like a big fair that they had. She wanted to come down to it, and he was like, there's no way in hell. The next day, tires are slashed in her truck.
Stacy didn't want to marry him. She was terrified of him. But what could she do? He was a police officer. The poor girl was stuck between these two men, one who cared too much and the other who didn't care at all. There was a witness that said that they saw Jimmy arguing with Stacy at a store. Apparently, Jimmy was threatening Stacy with, "I'll kill you," if she kept up with Rodney.
My personal opinion when I heard that she had been killed was that Fennell had done it immediately. And I know a number of people around here that felt the same way, because they'd either observed enough about his personality and that sort of thing. And when we heard that she had been having an affair with a black guy, it was like, well, that's why he did it, because his ego wouldn't let him. I mean, that would be a tremendous affront to his ego. You know, his bride-to-be, you know, messing around with a black guy. You know, he couldn't handle it.
This was enough evidence to point to Jimmy as the murderer, and a lot of people thought so since Jimmy was an angry and a very violent guy. But regardless of that, Rodney was put on trial with the evidence of a simple DNA. He is given 2 public defenders 2 months before the trial, and they are not good public defenders. But on the trial, it's like everyone forgot the actual crime. Images of Stacy's nude body were shown on court. This was because everyone was so focused on the rape situation. They had a medical examiner say that she had been raped, though the doctor did not know they were going to use his statement as evidence, and he explained that it could have been consensual sex. Rodney and Stacy were having an affair, and his DNA was on scene, so the chances of them having a consensual sex were pretty high. But the problem was that Rodney's public defenders never brought any witnesses to support that Rodney was in an uncontested relationship with Stacy.
If we would have been called as a witness, then most definitely we could have showed a relationship. But the excuse that they gave me is just that I was not credible enough, that I may do more harm to his situation, or to make him, they were trying to make him into this good person that what I'm saying could have turned him into a bad person or something. They didn't want any negative influence on the case. That's what they kind of told me.
Basically, everybody in Bastrop knows about them too. You know, it was a secret, but not a secret. You know what I'm saying?
The defense attorneys never brought witnesses to the stands.
May I say that with what they had, both of the trial attorneys did the best they could with what they had. And they chose not to bring up the affair, thinking that it would harm Rodney more than it would help. Now, that was their decision. I can't say that we agreed with them, but we worked for them.
There was also some witness tampering. Listen to this.
There was one lady, and I don't want to go through with her name, but she was threatened when they found out that we'd subpoenaed her to come and testify. She was threatened with legal reprisal should she come and testify.
When I went out to her residence the very next morning, because this was sort of late in the evening, we had to get a subpoena issued. She was scared to death.
She was totally frightened and would not answer the door.
Well, she answered the door, and I was able to I almost lost my hand trying to get the subpoena served. But obviously they had told her that not to say anything.
Consequences.
So
who told her? Someone in authority.
One of her friends, and I don't recall who, heard Stacy told her that her boyfriend had threatened her with killing her if she didn't tell Rodney. Cut off that relationship.
The trial lasted 3 weeks, and Rodney was sentenced to death by an all-white jury. Let's hear more about this monster, Jimmy Fennell. Jimmy was not a nice guy. He was abusive towards Stacy, and turns out he was also a rapist. Though they only found out this later, this was the only reason he went to jail.
They separated me and my boyfriend. They took him to the side, and Jimmy Fennell Jr. actually is the police officer who pulled me to the side and started talking to me. And then they ended up swapping, the officers did. So Jimmy Fennell Jr. went over to my boyfriend, and the other police officer came to me. And I guess Jimmy Fennell Jr. started questioning my boyfriend of how I was intoxicated because we were underage. And he told him that, I had got drunk at my job. We didn't want to get our friends in trouble because they were of age. And he asked him what I did, and he told him that I was a dancer. So they arrested my boyfriend for public intoxication, who at the time was in the military. So they took him to the Georgetown Police Department and booked him. Well, it left me alone at the apartment complex in Georgetown with Jimmy Fennell Jr., and he, at that time, told me that they didn't arrest my boyfriend, that they had actually just taken him to a hotel room to separate us for the night so that the confrontation didn't get any worse. And I was pretty hysterical and freaking out about them taking him. So I asked, can he come back? Can you bring him back? And he told me no. And he said that, however, he would take me to him and drop me off there. So he opened the front of his police vehicle, and I got in the front, and he turned the heater on because I was cold, so it kept me warm. And we started driving. Well, at that point, I wasn't very familiar with Georgetown, Texas. I didn't live there very, very long, so I really had no clue, if we were going the wrong direction or not. And he ended up taking me to a kind of a park area. It pretty much was like a jogging place. It had a strip of cement and, trees and grass and stuff. And he asked me to get out of the vehicle. So I stepped out of the vehicle and asked him, what was going on, what we were doing, how come he wasn't taking me to the hotel. And that's when he proceeded to ask me to dance for him. And I told him no, that I wouldn't do that. And when I told him no, it made him pretty angry. So he then grabbed me and slammed me up against the back of his patrol car. And he took his belt off that has, their guns and their weapons and stuff on it. And he slowly, individually started pointing out which each thing on his belt was. And he took his gun out and he placed it against my head. And he raped me. He had sexual intercourse with me. And I kept telling him no, and he wouldn't stop. And after he was done, he put me back into the patrol car and told me that if I ever told anybody that when he got out of prison, he would hunt me down and he would kill me. So he then gave me, this is the sick part, he then gave me his personal card and took me back to the apartments and told me that I was going to be a good girl and keep my mouth shut and that I was going to call him tomorrow, and after he went to his child's soccer game with his wife, he'd come back and pick me up. And he watched me walk all the way back up to the apartments and up the stairs and sat there in his patrol car until I banged on my friend's door. They opened it, and I went inside, and we called 911, asking for a rape kit, and told them what had happened. I went back outside, waiting for the ambulance because it was a very big apartment complex, so it could have caused confusion. And when I went back outside, I was on the phone with 911 waiting for the ambulance to show up, and Jimmy Fennell Jr. and the other fellow officer that was with him on the first call pulled into the apartment complex. So I took off running and screaming on the phone with 911, asking them how come they sent the same officer that I had just told them raped me. And dispatch was very confused, stating that they didn't dispatch any officers. They only dispatched an ambulance. I took off running. They got out of their cars and took off chasing me on foot, the officers. And I ran up some stairs, and I got cornered in pretty much. And there was no way to go back down without going through the police officers. And one of them walked up and grabbed my phone out of my hand and hung up on 911. And I was looking around. I couldn't see Jimmy Fennell anywhere. So I was very dazed, confused because I saw him pull in. So at that point, the police officers told me that I was under arrest for public intoxication put me back in one of their patrol cars in handcuffs. And the second I was in custody and they shut the door, Jimmy Fennell Jr. came out hiding from behind a tree. They had hit him to get me to come down the staircase.
Jimmy gets 10 years in jail, but guess what? He gets out earlier because of his good behavior. The poor girl who had been raped was terrified that he got out of prison. Still, no one does nothing about Rodney being in jail. This case had been dealt with emotion over biology, which should never happen in a case, but things start to get a little better when forensic pathologist Dr. Michael Baden comes in. The doctor concluded that Stacy had not been raped and that she died before midnight, which was when Jimmy was with her. There was another hearing, but Jimmy refused to testify. Jimmy invoked his Fifth Amendment right on the advice of his lawyer, which then released a statement that Jimmy and his family were outraged that he was still a suspect. But there was more evidence against Jimmy. One of his friends said that Jimmy went out drinking that night, which meant that Jimmy lied about staying home with Stacy. Could this mean that he had just finished killing Stacy and was relaxing after? Why would he lie in the first place? Even so, the lawyers refused to consider that testimony. So Jimmy will get out of prison, a free and apparently innocent man, while Rodney is denied a new trial. Judge Doug Shaver decided there wasn't enough evidence to start a new trial, but Rodney's previous defense attorneys finally tried to bring up the affair and the witnesses to the case. It's too late though, they should have done that in the first trial. The judge becomes ignorant and thinks they are lying. He has convinced himself that Rodney really is the murderer. Jimmy got out of prison in April 2018. His supervision will end in September. There is a fund going on to help Rodney get out of jail. A lot of people believe he's innocent, including his mother. Unfortunately, his mother died while he was in jail. I'm here hoping that there will be justice in the end. Thank you for watching.